Well, hello there. It is Saturday, October 10th, 2020. You can now relax and be informed. Here is your daily bite of news. The Commission on Presidential Debates has canceled the next planned presidential debate scheduled for this next Thursday. The debate was changed to a virtual setting after President Trump contracted COVID-19, but Trump has flat out refused to participate in a virtual format. The next up presidential debate is scheduled for October 22nd. Hurricane Delta weakened to a Category 1 storm as it made landfall in Louisiana, but still had 100-mile-per-hour winds that took out the power in some areas. The storm is expected to weaken further as it moves across the state on Saturday. The Trump administration's proposal to sell F-35 stealth warplanes to the United Arab Emirates is being stalled amid concerns raised over the sale's risk to U.S. technology security and Israel's defense. Senator Jim Risch, Republican of Idaho and chairman of the U.S. Senate Relations Committee, and Senator Bob Menendez, Democrat of New Jersey, point out that if Israel is the only country in the Middle East with the F-35s, then selling it to someone else no longer produces that qualitative military edge needed in the area, and they argue any arms sales must continue through a congressional consultation meeting and satisfy requirements of the Arms Export Control Act. The U.A.E. has close trading ties to China and Iran, so once this technology is handed over, it could potentially jump hands. Azerbaijan and Armenia have agreed to a ceasefire truce temporarily after Moscow brokered for an exchange of prisoners and time to gather their dead. The four-point agreement for the warring parties would halt hostilities on humanitarian grounds under criteria established by the Red Cross. Both sides committed to negotiating to a lasting peace in the Minsk process, a potentially long, drawn-out diplomatic effort that may or may not prevent escalations in the fighting over the Nagorno-Karabakh region. But Russia is threatening they will get further involved to support Armenia if need be. President of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, said he was happy to talk, but that they would get their territory back and that they were winning. People fleeing the fighting have said the violence is almost worse and more intense than the war in the 1990s that killed 20,000 people, partly due to the drones and modern warfare. Armenian soldiers have been fighting in trenches over small swaths of territory, often with decades-old artillery. Azerbaijan received their drones from Israel. Residents fleeing the fighting and cramming into safe areas and hotels say catching coronavirus is a relatively minor concern to them right now. After 6 months of nationwide demonstrations, Black Lives Matter is expanding its influence into politics by forming an official Political Action Committee, or PAC. The Black Lives Matter PAC rolls out its programs officially Monday and plans to support and endorse candidates for general elections, especially mayoral, county sheriffs, and district attorneys. We want to be able to not just speak in get out the vote language, Patrice Cullors, a co-founder for Black Lives Matter, says. We want to talk directly to voters about who they should be voting for. The goal of the PAC is to put more candidates who align with Black Lives Matter goals into office. The biggest Arctic expedition in history returns to German ports on Monday after a year-long mission of a scientific observation of sea ice melt in the transpolar drift. The Polar Stern mission, dubbed Mosaic, spent 389 days collecting data on the ecosystem at 4 research team observational sites within a 40-kilometer distance around the large icebreaker ship, the German Alfred Wegener Institute's Polar Stern ship. The $165 million expedition brought back 1,000 ice core samples. Analysis of the data will take up to 2 years, but should be able to help scientists project models for climate change over the next 20 to 100 years. The ship had departed from Norway in September 2019. The crew experienced long months of complete darkness, saw about 20 polar bears close up, and experienced a 2-month lockdown stranded in the North Pole when COVID-19 hit. Several mink animal breeding fur farms in Utah and Wisconsin have had to quarantine and are reporting that 12,000 minks have died from contracting the COVID-19 virus from humans. The University College of London concluded that 26 animals, including pigs, horses, and sheep, may also be vulnerable to infection from humans and could warrant further investigation and monitoring for coronavirus spread. The mink appear especially susceptible to the virus due to a specific protein in their lungs, but the fur being sold on the market from their bodies is processed commercially and should be safe from spreading COVID-19. Countries in the Netherlands, Spain, and Denmark have outlawed mink farms and slaughtered thousands of animals to prevent the virus spreading at the beginning of the outbreak. The U.S. hasn't really done much. The Fur Commission for the USA says there are 275 mink farms in 23 states, and they produce about $300 million in revenue annually. The New York Times unveiled some new insights from President Trump's tax records. In 2016, Trump is reported to have received $21 million in an unusual one-off payment from a Las Vegas hotel he owned with his friend and co-owner Phil Ruffin. The bulk of the money was put into a company called Trump Las Vegas Sales and Marketing, which had no clear business purpose and no employees. The Trump-Ruffin venture wrote it off as a business expense on their taxes. Then, Trump out of nowhere put $10 million into his campaign during a time when his campaign was cash-strapped and unable to get loans from legitimate bank sources who feared he would use a business loan money on his campaign. If the cash flow, the New York Times point out, is true, Trump's write-off of the $21 million to the IRS would be illegal, and his $10 million put from that business shell company toward his campaign would be considered an illegal campaign contribution. Trump's friend and business partner, Mr. Ruffin, has publicly supported Trump's campaign with $2.5 million, as well as backed his business ventures in the past. Mr. Ruffin has asked President Trump to revive a dormant bullet train project estimated to cost $5.5 billion that would take gamblers from California to Las Vegas. In March, a panel of Trump appointees approved the train company to start selling $1 billion in tax-free bonds to private investors. Trains could be up and running as soon as 2024. Among the chief beneficiaries will be Mr. Ruffin and Donald Trump. Well, that will conclude our news for today. If you'd like to read up on these topics, please see our sources in the description below. Subscribe and you shall receive a daily news update. Thank you for listening. Be relaxed, be informed, and be connected.